everyone, and welcome to Baden-Powell Institute. My name is Brian Burse, and I'm the Scoutmaster of Troop 50 in Alliance, Ohio. In this session, we will be discussing ways that you can apply technology to the scouting model during a pandemic and beyond. There's a lot of information to cover, so let's begin. I'm going to start by sharing with you a PowerPoint presentation that I have created for the sake of this session. You should see controls on the screen as I'm recording in a Zoom meeting. Bear with me. Let's begin. Goals for this session are to explore available resources and discuss how they can be applied for success. I've broken it down into three sections. The first, digital communication, Zoom and more. How to run virtual meetings, resources for planning meetings, and means of direct communication. In the second section, we'll discuss integration and adaptation of newfound tools to increase effectiveness as leaders. And then we'll talk about how we can meet in person once again. Lastly, we'll be covering some available policies and practices that you can use as Scout leaders. A disclaimer, before we begin, remember that I'm not an expert. What I'm presenting is what I have encountered. There's sure to be countless and better alternatives available. Like you, I'm a volunteer who wants only to do right by the Scouts in my units and by their parents and our community. I work hard to find new ways to be adaptive to the constantly changing landscape of Scouting and, most importantly, to keep the Scouts engaged in learning. A special thanks. Being here today, taking this course, you've shown that you believe, much like I do, that we have to be flexible and willing to keep learning new things. Thank you for being that leader who cares enough to dedicate your time to our Scouts and to the Scouting program. Let's talk about digital communication. In this section, we'll take a look at some examples of tools and resources available to help you with communicating and holding your meetings. First and foremost, virtual meetings. Zoom is a wonderful tool. You can host or join meetings at the touch of a button. There's a free trial available and a paid subscription for added features. Some of those features include breakout rooms for smaller groups to meet, polling for surveys and elections, and obviously the ability to share your screen and materials with groups and participants. Early in 2020, our unit learned that we may not be able to continue or hold our troop meetings in person, and immediately set out to find a viable alternative and began a free trial of Zoom. We decided after one or two meetings that we would do well to purchase a subscription, which eliminates time limits and gave us the ability to have a fixed password for our meetings. The cost was not prohibitive at about $15 a month, and we have found so many uses for it. As a matter of fact, I wish I'd have known back then to buy stock in Zoom. Even though we've been able to meet in person by following restrictions, we still find that an online meeting place gives us so many opportunities. Weekly PLC meetings, committee meetings, meetings with the chartered organization, individual patrol meetings, boards of review have been held over Zoom. It's a wonderful tool. Some other services available for online meetings include WebEx, Google Meet, Cisco AnyConnect. I believe Google has another format called Hangouts. Microsoft has Microsoft Teams. Many different things available to us, and many at no cost. Some good examples of the capabilities of Zoom. Troop meetings can be run as if you were in person, complete with opening and closing ceremonies. Here you see a screenshot of an opening ceremony from one of our meetings where Scouts are standing and saluting as we open the meeting with the Pledge of Allegiance. Some things that I would recommend before you begin meeting or early on in your meetings would be to set rules. We had our scouts choose from a series of online videos about proper Zoom etiquette that we'd found and pre-screened on YouTube and other resources, and then held a meeting with all of the parents and scouts to go over those rules and guidelines. Having the scouts help us with designing the rules and choosing how they would be presented helped to give them a sense of ownership. As I mentioned, we're sharing the screen for the sake of this presentation. Here's an example of sharing the screen during a meeting where our senior patrol leader had come up with a meeting agenda, and we shared that throughout the meeting so that everybody was able to keep informed and on track. Obviously, we can record meetings for review. There are some pitfalls and some things to consider before you do that, and particularly before you were to use that information for any kind of sharing. But here's an example of a recorded meeting with our troops. One of the great things about being able to meet virtually, we were able to challenge our scouts to present 4 rank requirements. In this example, a couple of the scouts presented to the troop ways to deal with substance abuse, a rank requirement, and actually presented their slideshow using the same templates that we were able to use for our presentations for Baden-Powell Institute. So the scouts themselves are a wonderful resource. Another example of a scout presenting to the troop for rank requirements. Here are the basic parts of a canoe. Now in these slides, a couple here, I'll warn you that this is part of a presentation that I had already put together where my wife and sons volunteered to participate and be our screenshots. This is an example of breakout rooms. So you can see in the screen there, breakout rooms that says not started. You have room 1, room 2, room 3. Those rooms can be named. And as members join your meeting, you can assign them to a breakout room. And when you're ready, you open the rooms, and those participants then are prompted to join the breakout room. We've been able to use this feature for committee meetings as well as patrol meetings during our regular troop meetings. So we'll begin the meeting as a troop. We'll break out into patrols for 25 to 30 minutes. And then the host is able to send out a notification to everyone that it's time to get back together. And we come back together as a troop and discuss what was done in the patrol meetings and make plans accordingly. Another example of a breakout room. Here are our adult leaders after being broke out from the main meeting. It's nice to be able to have the ability to hold meetings where we're all like-minded and excited to see one another. And what we found was that our scouts truly enjoyed being able to spend time with one another, even if it wasn't in person. One thing that I will say is that if you're going to have adult leaders in the patrol meeting, and we have assistant scoutmasters who are assigned to each patrol, it's very important to consider youth protection training and make sure that we have our 2D leadership covered so that there are always 2 adults with any group of scouts, even virtually. One of the things that we learned for sure about any virtual meeting is that they can be very dry. So we decided early on to find ways to give the scouts the opportunity to have fun and be creative. And that's vital to the success of any meeting, virtual or in person. So early on, we tried out some virtual competitions. And in this case, we had a sing-along where we put the lyrics of the song up on the screen. And you can see we're having a pretty good time singing along with one another. We had challenged our patrols to put together virtual skits and demonstrations. In this example, one of our patrols created a skit and presentation about the differences between scouting in person and scouting from home, and had each member discuss one of the points that you see here. And you can see that it gives them the opportunity to be silly, and it's really important for them to be able to have fun. One of the great tools about Zoom is polling. You can set up a poll in your meeting, advanced settings ahead of a meeting so that it's all ready to go, and then you can assign your groups within, say, for instance, you're having patrol elections. We held our OA elections, our leadership position elections, and have taken opinion polls using Zoom. The host of the meeting can decide all of the questions, who will be able to answer them, and how the results are recorded. One suggestion that I would make, I found out in one of our earlier attempts, is to document those results as they're on the screen and or take a screenshot. There are ways to record them. There are things that you have to do ahead of time and choices that you have to make once you've closed the meeting. And unfortunately, in one particular instance, I lost the results of a poll. But here in this example, you can see, again, this was just a sample where I was taking a screenshot of my wife and a couple of my sons so that I could show you all what it looks like to have a poll. And in this case, I was a little bit silly with it. You can see the questions there. Is Sandy Beaver District awesome? Absolutely, without a doubt, best district ever. And is Chris Hyde doing a great job for Sandy Beaver District? Meh, kind of. No question about it. And best DE ever. So just an example of how things can be done. Some finer points about Zoom. Connection quality is key. We learned early that if the device that you're using for your meeting is connected to a Wi-Fi signal, and you're using that same device for both video and audio, there can be a severe lag. Unfortunately, we had a guest come to one of our meetings to talk to us, and during his presentation, there was so much lag that most of the participants couldn't understand what he was saying. And I've had video presentations that have gone out to the troop and didn't know until afterward that there were skips and jumps and inaudible sections. So it's really important that you have a strong connection. And what we have found that works the best is to use a device like a PC or laptop or an iPad for the video portion, but then to dial in for the audio connection. In fact, I purchased a separate speakerphone device that I'm using right now for the sake of this presentation, because it allows us to be hands-free and not necessarily rely on the quality of the microphone in a cellular phone or even a landline. So it seems to have worked out pretty well. Most of our scouts have become very accustomed to virtual meetings through school, but still need to be reminded once in a while that moving around and creating extra noise can disrupt the meeting. You as the host have the ability to mute them or shut off their video, but we encourage our scouts to participate with video on so that we can see them, and we know they're engaged and participating fully. Some other fun things that we've done in virtual meetings. We held a game of virtual Jeopardy, created a series of categories based upon scouting skills, and used a template that was available online to have the patrols compete for points. We held a virtual scavenger hunt, where we gave clues to normal household and scouting related items and gave the scouts time to find them and present them to the group for points. Skills races between members of patrols. Patrol feud. We held a talent show, which was an absolute hoot. And opened an account, a free account with Kahoot, which is an online resource for interactive and games that many scouts are familiar with through school. It was one of the suggestions that my PLC brought to me during one of our meetings. Another example Christmas song, Name That Tune. I created a Christmas song playlist with my iPhone, and we chose songs and played short clips, 5 to 10 seconds, and made them more difficult as we went along. And this was a great way for us to celebrate the holiday as a troop in a virtual meeting setting. Some resources for planning meetings. I can tell you that there are so many different resources available to us online as adult leaders. I thought that I would point out some of the ones that I have turned to regularly and most often more recently. One is Brian on Scouting. Brian on Scouting is a magazine blog through the Scouting magazine designed for adult leaders. Brian answers questions that are very current and applicable and offers immediate advice and current policy information. You can subscribe to the mailing list to receive regular updates and resources. And for instance, one recent message was about organizing a video game tournament for your scouts. And one of the great things about Brian on Scouting is that you can go to the website and do a search for any articles for nearly any scouting related topic. It's a fantastic resource for policy, for practice, for suggestions about how to run a meeting or an outing. There's so much information on that site. Also, Facebook forums and discussion groups. There's valuable information to be gleaned from our peers around the country and the world, and Facebook can provide the ability to speak with them. If you search Facebook for Scoutmaster Corner, Boy Scout volunteers or Cub Scout volunteers, for example, you can request access or follow their pages. There are supportive leaders with plenty of know-how who are willing to share their advice and experiences, including ways to keep virtual meetings exciting. We found this to be a great resource as well. The only catch is that you have to be ready to filter out negative comments and negative things that are said about our program, unfortunately. Another resource available for our meetings, virtual museum tours and invitations to guest speakers. A quick search online will reveal a number of available tours at well-known institutions, some of which are even offering tours that are specific to rank or merit badge requirements. It's great stuff. It's free. Some of it can be scheduled at your convenience so that it can take place during a meeting, and doesn't have to be virtual. You can have a virtual tour as a small group and still meet restrictions and guidelines for coronavirus. Another wonderful site is Scout Smarts. This website's hosted and run by an Eagle Scout named Cole. It's a wonderful resource for virtual meetings and all things Eagle related. And you can join Cole's mailing list for regular updates. Some means of direct communication. It's very important to be able to communicate with all of the members of your unit and to be able to distinguish between groups of members for simplicity. I'll talk about that a little bit more. Always remember youth protection training in any form of communication. Always keeping adults and parents included in your messages. There are many free apps and programs available that can be very useful tools. For several years now, I've been using Remind 101. It was something that we saw that our school systems were using, and when I found that it was free and that I was able to create groups easily by inviting parents and scouts to join those groups, it's something that I have come to rely on. For instance, I have a group for the entire troop, which includes the scouts and their parents and leaders. I have a group for the PLC and leaders. I have a group for the committee members and leaders. And one of the great things about Remind is that it allows us to attach documents and links within the messages. There is a limitation to the number of characters, but you get very accustomed to sending out short messages or shorter messages as a result. Some other available means of communication include the Band app. I know some Scout masters who swear by this one. Also group text, but I'll tell you, group text can be a little bit difficult because the Scouts, they like to respond personally. I have any group texting set up so that responses from the recipients don't go to the entire group for the safety's sake. And of course, email distribution. Email is great for large messages with a lot of information. You can send attachments and links easily, but I have been cautioned. I have been told that my emails are too long. The important thing is to keep what you need to have seen by your recipients at the top of the message and keep it clear. It is easy to lose your readers with too much information. Some other great means of direct communication include Scoutbook. Hopefully everybody is taking advantage of Scoutbook and all of its useful tools. Scoutbook has inside of it the ability to email the entire troop to specific patrols, to groups of members simply by selecting their names and contact information. Gives you the ability to share information and track advancement, and it is just a wonderful tool. There are permission slips embedded, and to be honest, my favorite thing about Scoutbook so far, aside from advancement tracking, has been the interactive calendar. Your unit's Scoutbook calendar can be exported for distribution. So you can make a list, you can make a spreadsheet from that information. It can also be added as an RSS feed to an Outlook or Google Calendar, and can be imported to many devices as an iCal feed. So what that means is, for instance, my wife and I and all of our sons who have Apple phones and iPads, we have the ability to import a URL, web link to the troop's calendar and make it something that appears automatically on our devices. And so any changes that a leader should put into Scoutbook automatically appears in that feed, in that device, for as long as that URL doesn't change. This is a wonderful tool. I know that when I put something into the calendar for Scoutbook, it's automatically going to appear on all of our calendars, on all of our devices, and it will be visible when we check our calendars daily. Some more means of direct communication include social media and internet, obviously. We're here today, we're online. You're all aware of these platforms, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. They can be great tools for sharing information and achievements of your scouts with your troop and others. But remember that social media can also be dangerous, and your unit's sites are best if run by or monitored by adult leadership very closely. For Facebook, PSA policy does prohibit closed groups, but encourages open pages. Our council and district operate pages and share great information regularly. A unit website can be an extremely useful tool for communicating and housing information. They do require the knowledge of managing and creating a site and require regular maintenance and upkeep. We have recently, in our unit, acquired the domain of www.troop50.net, and we're in the process of launching that site. Still more means of direct communication. The Google platform is one that is not only easy to use, but that most of our scouts are very familiar with, as they're using many of the available tools in school. I'll be the first to say that I was reluctant to get Google crazy, as I found myself in a position where the occasional limitations of the software led me to swear it off completely in favor of Microsoft Office products. Since the quarantine, and since we've worked to become more virtual, I have become a believer and have made use of Google's suite of applications quite often. Our troop began using Google Classroom almost as soon as our virtual meetings began, and almost immediately set up a Google Drive. Google Classroom for your unit can be a simple way to communicate and share with your scouts, leaders, and parents. You can share links, chat about meeting plans, share documents, and have a place for your PLC and patrols to talk to one another in a secure location. Google Classroom is closed to those who have your classroom code. A bit of caution. Some Scouts have had trouble logging into our classroom due to limitations on their school-provided email account and have needed to use a different email account to log in. So Scouts who are already involved with Google Classroom accounts through school and have logged in using their school-provided email may have difficulty logging in to both the school's classrooms and your troops. A simple fix was to create a separate email account for the Scout and their parents. Google Drive account is a shared drive, virtual drive, that can serve your unit as a warehouse for documentation and important unit resources. And Google Forms is a very useful way to have forms filled out electronically or to take surveys. Here are examples. This is our Google Classroom for Troop 50 BNG. You can see a description. We chose not to upload a photo right away, but there were some stock photos that we've got a little camping scene there. The classroom code is blocked out for the sake of this presentation. But for instance, the summer camp guidebook for 7 ranges for this coming year was made available to us recently, so posted a link directly to the classroom for everyone to be able to see that. One of our Scouts actually posted the link below that to an updated warehouse of merit badge workbooks online. Here are a couple of examples of the information that we have housed in our Google Drive. So the Google Drive can be accessed from mobile devices. It can be accessed by link, and it's very, very useful. You can see that we have 15 gigabytes of storage space available to us free of charge. The first half of this screen shows the main menu for our Troop 50 resources with all of the different topics that Scouts and their parents can choose from. And then down below, I've gone into our advancement folder, and then inside of that, there are folders for each rank requirement and set. And here is the Eagle folder, complete with the brand new 2021 Eagle workbook. So this information is available within a matter of clicks to all of the Scouts in our units. Here's an example of our Google Forms, and I mentioned earlier some of the things that we have to consider as adult leaders when we're doing virtual work and social media in particular. So for the sake of creating this presentation and for other reasons, our Facebook page for the troop, the upcoming website, we thought that it would be very prudent for us to create a talent release form. We used some questions and language that were available to us online and created this form. This form then goes out in form of email to all of the members of the troop so that the parents and guardians of the Scouts have the choice of either filling out the form directly in their email and submitting it, or selecting a link and going to Google Forms. And then once it's completed and submitted, it automatically sends an email to me saying that I have a form ready to read. And then the results are set up in graphs and diagrams and are exportable to Excel or Google for further review. So I can compare roster notes to the names of those who have been submitted. And we were able to easily get everyone to sign the talent release form so that their images could be used in this presentation and in other resources. Moving on to part 2 of the presentation. Integration and adaptation of newfound tools to increase effectiveness as leaders. So far, we've learned about some of the many tools available to us as leaders. And now we'll talk about ways we can continue to use them. Our landscape and the restrictions we face seem to have changed daily over the last 12 months. As leaders, we've had to adapt and become flexible to continue to provide a quality program for our Scouts. Here are some ways we've found success and ways that success can translate into effective scouting moving forward. Using virtual platforms. we've been able to hold regular troop and patrol, committee, and PLC meetings, rarely missing a scheduled event. Our PLC has become more involved in all aspects of planning, and it's not unusual for our youth leaders to meet weekly, or even more often as needed, virtually, with or without adult direction. It's very fulfilling to know that our PLC is meeting to discuss plans for the troop on their own. Our patrol leaders have been able to utilize the tools at hand, FaceTime and Zoom, etc., to work with their members for planning, for skills assessment, for teaching, and for recording rank requirements. Some ways we've continued to adapt. As restrictions were adjusted, we found ways to meet the needs of our scouts, first by allowing them to decide how best to proceed. Our PLC decided to hold a vote and plan to work on merit badges as groups. We held classes outside to facilitate proper social distancing. We were able to camp as a troop by reserving multiple campsites in a council camp, maintaining safe distancing, following food handling practices, while continuing to work on merit badges and rank requirements. We made numerous submissions to the Council's virtual fall camporee. We held a drive-in court of honor, live streaming our opening ceremony from our scout room to our Facebook page, so spectators could still participate and maintain social distancing. In the parking lot, we broadcast the presentation of rank, merit badges, and other awards over FM radio to parents' cars, and they honked their horns in celebration of each scout's achievements, and it was a blast. We were also able to hold a socially distanced court of honor for an eagle, a flag retirement ceremony, and a special flag ceremony for Veterans Day. So these tools can still be used as we move back to in-person meetings. As we continue to adapt and apply what we've learned, it's apparent that some of our virtual tools won't be leaving us. We hear all too often about the new normal. But we've absorbed the habits and tools we developed through quarantine and restriction, and we'll be able to continue to streamline processes and be better communicators than before the pandemic. In order to get us back to our normal version of scouting, we must make certain concessions and be prepared to make more concessions. Let's look at some of those possibilities. We as leaders must always maintain a solid relationship with our chartered organizations. It's been my experience that this relationship has not only been built over years of trust and cooperation, but through good communication. It's imperative that we maintain an open channel with our chartered organization representative and executive, and work together to solidify plans to return to scouting indoors. Many of you may have already had some success in this regard, but documentation is key to moving forward. In order to begin meeting at our chartered organization, we held virtual discussions and agreed to a set of rules and guidelines along with a waiver form that each Scout's parent and each adult leader would need to agree upon and acknowledge with a signature. We also designed a form that is used for each meeting to record temperatures and attendance, as well as the location of each meeting within the building for the sake of contact tracing and proper cleaning. Looking more in depth in Section 3 about policies and practices, we've discussed many of the ways to apply available technology along with ways to get back to scouting. So let's talk briefly about some of the important policies and practices we must observe to make scouting in a pandemic a success. Earlier, we discussed the Google form that we use for our talent release. When planning to post a Scout's image on a website, social media post, or training slide, it's important that you obtain permission to do so. The talent release form is available in Scout Book, but it's specific to that platform. Other forms can easily be created for your unit and filled out physically or electronically using Google Docs or a fillable PDF. Or you could print it out and hand it to your Scouts' parents. Here is an example of a printed talent release. This is the same language that we used in our Google form, only in a printed form. This and other resources will be included in this presentation. Additional policy considerations. Always confer with the Council website and officials in the event that you have questions about a policy or practice, and be prepared to do what's asked of you. As leaders, we must set a good example for our Scouts, always working to comply with expectations and restrictions that are designed to keep us all safe and healthy. The BSA, our local council, and its committees apply the recommendations of the CDC and state and local agencies when setting forth guidelines and restrictions. Be responsive and be ready to adapt. These rules can and probably will change. In closing, we never forget that the success of our Scouts and our units relies on the support we receive from our volunteers and their families. I would be remiss if I didn't mention the wonderful resources made available to our Scouts throughout the pandemic by the Buckeye Council. Be sure to take a look at all of the home scouting and restart guidelines found at buckeyecouncil.org. And lastly, a special thanks goes to our immensely talented team of staff members and volunteers who worked so hard to keep our program going and to give us opportunities like an online BPI. So, ladies and gentlemen, I will close by saying thank you again for joining me today, and thank you for all that you do for scouting, for the Scouts, for your communities, and be sure to check out some of the resources that are included in this presentation today. Many of the things that I discussed toward the end of the presentation are set as attachments for your review. Feel free to use them. If you have any questions or comments, concerns, suggestions for me, feel free to reach out. Email me at troop50alliance@gmail.com. That's the best way to reach me, troop50alliance@gmail.com. And again, thank you all very much, and happy scouting.